to talk about the war today in Afghanistan through the perspective of kids, but also embedded in the real conflict today between NATO and Taliban. I mean, like in 2000, we are talking about 2010 to 2014. I was basically in Afghanistan between 2007 until 2015. Yeah, last time I was 16. So for making this project. So the situation now in Afghanistan is a bit different, but at that time it was kind of, this reality. And so that's basically what me as a filmmaker has always been inspiring me, is telling like a real existing story like this conflict, but through mostly a kind of a poetical approach. And that's what I want to talk to you all about. I'm not interested in making films which are just like captive, like a captation of like what is the story, what is the war about, who is fighting against who, what, like the pre-reality, but trying to dive deeper into fascination, imagination, and a kind of a poetic layer. Of course, if you're working in a conflict zone, this is like not so easy just to focus like, okay, like we're gonna make some poesy now here. We are still in a war zone, but in a war zone you have a lot of conflicts, and those conflicts, if you're gonna say, I mean, it's maybe hard to understand, but they bring along also a kind of, I'm not gonna say beauty, but a kind of you know, very unexpected human behaviors which I'm searching for, and that was also my aim in The Land of the Enlightened. So I'm gonna I selected like 5 clips of this film, which we're gonna study like one by one. I'm gonna talk a bit more about the character specifically, why I choose this character, what this character was doing in real life in Afghanistan, but what was his underlying motivation, or why specifically I want to work out this character in this whole filming process. So I would suggest that, first of all, if someone has questions during the process of our working, just raise your hand. We have like 15 minutes Q&A foreseen, but if you say like, okay, I want to clear this out, or can you talk more about this, feel free. I would love to create a more vital dialogue than just like having this part at the very end. So if we could show like clip number 1, please. So this is like one of the characters that we took out of this group of kids who were actually asked by their parents, who were living basically in a kind of minefield, to dig up mines and to open them, to get out the explosives and to sell the explosives mostly for like insurgency groups, and the metal, keep the metal and sell it as like scrap metal. The way we worked here was, of course, it's impossible to work with a film crew in a real minefield. But what was really interesting for me is that this kid that you see on the screen was a real kid who is doing this in daily life and is also living in this minefield, which is like the background of this whole setting, who lost a leg because of digging up these mines. And we worked with him like in the same setting. Like, okay, we staged this sequence, of course, but it was for me very important to work with kids, how they live in Afghanistan today, and besides the fact that they had a lot of dreams and fantasies and that they were young kids of 10, 12 years who want to play, that they actually also had to grow up as like very fast as mini adults. And those mini adults were kind of, you know, people of 20, 25 years old, like you see them here. So that was a story that we worked out with those kids. Now we're gonna show like a second clip, and then I'm gonna specify more about the world of the children and then the world of the army and why I took like those two different sides. Can we play clip number 2, please? Hello?
Yeah, that's it. You gotta have soft music when you talk about taking over a country without people knowing. Step one is you get the support of the locals. I'm gonna trade them brass for scarves and whatnot. I figure that will stimulate their economy. They can melt it down and make IEDs out of it. Get rupees from the Pakistanis and brass from us. It'll be good. Good for everyone involved. Step number 2, becoming king of Afghanistan, is once we pull out, I'm gonna stay behind. I'm gonna hide in a inconspicuous vehicle, something nobody has around here, maybe a white Toyota Camry wagon. There's not too many of those rolling around here. I'm gonna hide out for a little bit, and then I'm gonna grow a beard out. And I might become supreme overlord of just a province, one province at a time. I might migrate to Pakistan, cross the border a couple times. I don't know yet. But I definitely want to have an army of children because they frighten me. And I think they're like clowns. They scare people just because they're so innocent.
So the scene that you saw now is the soldier Dennis Cleaves of the American Army. He was actually, for me, more an actor than a soldier, but which was very welcoming for us, of course, as filmmakers. The guy had a lot of inspiration, and you had to understand that we were living in an outpost on the top of a mountain, in like a kind of a bunker that the Americans created, and they were only provided like supplies and weapons by helicopters at night because we were surrounded by Taliban constantly. So it was the only way to get out was only by helicopter. And those guys had to stay there like for 6 months in one block. And the only kind of way how to have contact with the outside world, I would say, out of their outpost was through children. We were doing like contrabanda with them. They brought like a lot of special things that the Americans wanted from them. Like, for example, I remember little monkeys, transistor radios to listen to Pakistani music, some local money and this and that. And those kids, they came to the outpost after each firefight. So the Taliban was attacking with mortars or machine guns, and the Americans, you're going to see this later on in another clip, they were responding with a lot of machine gun fire, mortars, and a lot of other stuff, weapons. And the kids, actually, when the firefight was done, they came to the outpost and they collected all the brass, the empty bullets, because it's like brass, it's a lot of money, of course. And that's what the soldier was fantasizing about. Like the whole time, these kids were, okay, it was a huge firefight. They were coming like with a lot of bags on the top of this hill. And they were exchanging, sometimes I remember also for hash and like other stuff. So they gave them brass. the Americans gave them breasts, and they gave them the monkeys, the hash, and all that stuff. And it was a big question for the Americans what was going to happen with this breast, because you have to understand it's a technical thing. I don't know, maybe there are soldiers here or people who served as soldiers, but if you have an RPG, it's like a part of this rocket is copper, is brass, and when copper is liquid, it can penetrate up to 30 centimeters of armor. And it's kind, you know, if you treat it well, it can consider it to be as a weapon or part as a weapon. And so the Americans were very scared at some point that the Taliban was, through these kids, going to create like bombs or whatever with this copper to penetrate the armor of Humvees and armed vehicles of the Americans. So at some point they stopped this trafficking. But Cleves, he had like lots of ideas, and he was like the whole time fantasizing, making songs about what these kids were going to do. He was even thinking that some king behind the mountains was having like a huge chessboard, and he was playing to another king about the fate of Afghanistan with little soldiers made out of this brass. So which was for us like, of course, interesting to film. But those guys on this mountaintop, the only thing that they had to do was watch out over a road that the Americans needed to bring supplies on, and the Taliban was very often like putting bombs on this road. And whenever they saw like the Taliban was going to create like booby traps, they were calling, and then they were bombing, or they were sending other American patrols to avoid that. And so they were watching the whole time with binoculars into the valley, and they never talked to Afghans and to those kids, you know, so they had like a whole imaginary world, like how these Afghans would live, even they were like 6 months up to a year on this mountaintop, and they never really touched the Afghan life. So we played a lot with this gap, like how the Americans perceive the Afghans, and especially these Afghan kids. But also, when we start filming for more than a year, I think, with these Afghan children, they had the same, apparently, the same perception about the Americans, because they never could get hold on the Americans itself. And they had like ideas, yeah, these Americans, they are building here like some empire, or they want to take over our country. And of course, there was a language barrier. So it was like this huge communication gap, which was like at the same time a kind of a mirror that we try to work out in our film in this conflict zone. So I'm gonna now show a third clip, which is also telling about the dream of this little boy, Ghulam Nasir, which became our main character, and who wants to marry the beautiful princess and live with his friends in the palace of the king, embedded in this, surrounded by this war.
Вопросную кудиш толком информации. Формулировал специальную информацию в кубе.
So the clip that you saw here was like reflecting on the dream of Ghulam Nasir, who wanted to marry the princess of Afghanistan, even she was very small. You have to understand, in reality, those kids, they were controlling a valley, a very important valley, which was connecting Pakistan with Tajikistan and Afghanistan. It's like a 3-point valley crossover system, yeah, like entry point. In reality, a lot of trafficking from opium was going from Afghanistan to Tajikistan through the smuggling caravans. And those kids, they were like Ghulam Nasir in reality. Together with his group, they were actually asked by the government, but it was through their parents, to control one of these valleys and to stop, or, you know, to keep like peace in these valleys, and at least to stop much as possible of this trafficking of opium. It's in the film. It's a pity that, okay, the film is 90 minutes. I guess that maybe nobody has seen the film, or maybe in the past, I don't know. But those kids, they were actually asking like tamoja, or how you say that, taxes, you know, like to all the caravans who were passing through the valley in the opium. So it was kind of a corrupt system. So they let them pass through towards Tajikistan, but they had to give like X amount of kilogram of opium to them. And in those mountains, there is no money available, and everybody is like paying in opium. Why? Because opium, it's like very valuable, and it's replacing money and it's, how to say, like one Kalashnikov bullet of opium is like the same amount of money. So I remember that it was like, for example, 50 Kalashnikov bullets opium is one sheep. And one sheep, it's like, I don't know, like it's equal to like one blanket for a tent. And there's a lot of fabricated stuff that is like circulating. And so also, if in Afghanistan, that's the tradition, if you want to marry, basically you have to pay for the wife. I mean, like you have to pay for the family of the wife. And a lot of this money was, of course, also translated into opium. And that's why this kid, that's the scene that you saw now, he is like actually gathering much as possible opium to pay it for the family of his wife to marry this girl. And so that's why he's trying to stop much as possible caravans. So yeah, that's what this sequence is about. So I want to just come back on the fact that in this conflict in Afghanistan, we found a lot of these interesting aspects in daily life, which were, for me, because of the conflict, of course, also created, but which for me were also very important to talk about, because that was also the poetic layer that I want to bring in the film. Not only like, okay, Taliban is fighting with the Americans, and then we have some kids who are trying to survive. I think that's the kind of language of cinema I want to talk about, and that's also the kind of cinema I want to make in my next films. And yeah, I think even we had to stage a lot of things. That's also why The Land of Enlightened became like a hybrid film, because we, of course, like a real smuggling caravan, which you're gonna see in the next clip, it's impossible to film. Or you can film it just with like a small handycam and you can capture it like from long, but from far away, but it's not interesting to see it. So what we choose was rather an approach like, okay, you have the real kids who are doing this, we have the real areas where it's happening, we have the same context, we know all the stories of witnesses, of people who are involved in all this, so let us recreate it, because those kids do it anyway, they know it best because it's their daily life. It's the same as the kid who was like digging up the mines. And that's what we're gonna see in the next clip. It's the smuggling of the same group of kids who were doing, besides stopping the opium caravans, they were smuggling weapons coming from Tajikistan into Afghanistan, which was actually the payment for a lot of opium caravans who were going to the other side, and they were returning for weapons to provide like weapons for the Taliban to keep the war going on. And those kids were also involved, but of course, again, you cannot film a weapon caravan. It's very dangerous, and again, it's cinematographically, it will lose a lot of character. So what we did, we gathered like 40 horses, we made like all the ammunition cases that we need, and we basically said to the kids like, okay, guys, this is your job, this is your life, you know it better how it is, how it works, so just show it to us. And that's how we basically made the film. So that's also what we're gonna see in the next scene. So they told me, yeah, Peter, we come from this point to that point, we pay this guy, and we said, okay, David, just do it, and we will film it also in a kind of a documentary way. So, because I wasn't expecting like how it's gonna look like, so we were kind of, you know, staging moments, and trying to captivate it in the most natural way as possible. Also, the skilled children in Afghanistan, they never saw a camera, for example. They did not understand what we were doing there. It was very weird for us. I remember the first time when I came there with this big ARRI camera, they thought it was like a rocket launcher or something. And so they were really scared about all this. But then, you know, we learned, okay, if we want to captivate their lives, we have to give them a lot of space just to touch some ideas. Like I said to Ghulam Nasir, you want to become the king of Afghanistan. All right, what you gonna do? And he was like, yeah, I'm gonna, you know, gather my kids, my horses, and we're gonna drive up to Kabul, and we're gonna take the palace of the king. And so that's basically how we build this scene. So I said, okay, David, you know, you leave to the palace of the king. We went to the palace in Kabul. We brought the kids there with their horses, and we said, okay, gallop to the palace and take over the palace. And so how that was like, you know, a very organic way of working. We never knew where we're going to end up, but I wanted to keep the natural feelings and the natural character of the kids much as possible. So the next clip that we're gonna watch is like a mixture between, first of all, this staged caravan smuggling with weapons, and then combined with the real war with the American army, which was like completely 100% documentary. So we stayed there for 3 months, 3-4 months. So that's also how we build this film, like stage parts, documentary, back to stage parts, and that's, yeah, a good result of this hybrid approach. So, clip 4, please.
fucking down by the Jalal bit. To the left of the turret, it's fucking in between the turret. You saw somebody? The left of the fucking...
No, I believe you. I just want to know that.
There it is! In between there and the castle front! Get the fuck out!
40 seconds to walk off.
Guys on him! Saw some dust kick up from a muzzle blast! 4-9-4-7! Get the weapons away. 30 seconds.
So yeah, this was just like an example of daily life at this outpost. It was like very predictable. We woke up at 7 o'clock, breakfast at 8 o'clock, and at 9 o'clock Taliban was attacking until 12 o'clock. So it was like their daily routine, I would say. And so yeah, these Americans, they were like, they knew what was going to happen. And at some point, it was a very strange situation because you have to understand we were there on this mountaintop with like 20 people very close on each other. Like these fortifications and these positions were dug in this mountain. They had even gym rooms there. They had like, you know, like Counter-Strike games, really very absurd. And, you know, the war was completely surrounded around this mountaintop. And whenever the Americans, at some point when there was no war, or they were missing like one-day war, they were getting crazy. You know, it was like they started even like praying for having like the next day the firefight, because otherwise they were out of their rhythm. It was completely, yeah, you know, like I think a lot of those guys were completely traumatized after with PTSD for sure. I'm still in touch with a lot of those guys, but most of them, they completely left the army. And, you know, that's also what you see in this clip, for example. It's a small example, but you see this eagle who is like praying to find like his prey, like mouses and this and that. And he was there every day. And I remember this F-16s, they were diving also the same way like this eagle was flying down. And it was for me also like a kind of, you know, a play how this eagle would look down to the enemy like the Americans would look down to their enemy. It was also a sequence that unfortunately I cannot show you now, but there was a sniper scene going on at some point. So as I explained to you, these Americans were watching in the valley constantly what was going on, and they found out that at some point like some woman was watching with binoculars to them, and they were thinking, okay, she's spying, or she's like korektirovka, I think you say in Russian, for mortar attack. And we were filming this, and at some point they said, okay, guys, but now you have to leave because we're going to shoot that woman, and we don't want that you film that we shoot like an unarmed woman. But for them, it was like, okay, she's Taliban because she's watching us, and we cannot take that risk, so we have to kill her. And so I said, okay, we're going to leave this position. But my sound engineer, he was clever enough to leave his camera, no, his sound gear just like in a corner. And we recorded the entire sequence of what's going on. So there was a sniper taking position. There was another guy watching the woman. He took like the distance. He said it to the sniper, took like the wind and all that calculations that he had to give to the shooter. And they shot that woman. And of course, we ended up in the editing without images. But the sound was very important and it was very powerful, I would say. So what we did, you saw this bird. We filmed a lot this bird like during these 3 months, how he was diving, how he was spraying, how he was looking to his spray, how he was taking different positions. And so we used the image of this spraying bird on the guys who were like looking for this woman, giving the corrections, and finally shoot her. And the final moment when the sniper was saying, like when he was firing, was also the point when the eagle was diving down to get his mouse. So that's another example how I'm trying to build like metamorphosis or like another layer of filmmaking rather than just like captating what's going on, but like telling in a different way, which is much more suggestive and which opens up to much more imagination for the viewer. And I think that's also a message as a maker, that I want to leave open interpretations a lot to viewers. And because I think finally, if everybody comes out with a different perception or how he understands it, how he sees it, that is also a richness for the film. So I think we can continue to the last clip, just to, yeah, I will talk more in detail about it. Oh, wait.
Let's see what we got here. Oh, this is fucking...
Yeah, okay. Wait, can you just come back? I'll explain a bit more. So this clip is about the departure from the Americans of this outpost. It's yeah, I will tell something more because it's a longer story which has also to do with Ukraine. But let us watch it first because yeah, it will take a lot of time.
Let's see what we got here. Oh, this is fucking sweet. In a trash pit. All right, here you go. Oh, reading letters. I fucking love it. Dear Colin, I keep starting letters to you in different notebooks and not finishing them. You may get them in bits and pieces or all at once. I may tell you the same thing several times. I'm really not going crazy. I just left my notebook at work, so I started another letter at home. Pastor Linda is making a big slip and slide at church tomorrow.
Над горами, цепляя вершины, кружат вертолеты. Где-то эхом вдали прогремели последние взрывы. Только изредка ночью взорвут тишину пулеметы, проверяя, а все мы живы. Афганистан, 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 Афганистан. По афганским дорогам пришлось нам проехать немало. Мы тряслись в БТРах, нам небо служило палаткой. И надолго под звездами твердым законом нам стало не искать на земле жизни сладкой. Афганистан, 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 Афганистан. Здесь про страх и опасность мы будто с тобою забыли. И в минуту отчаяния мы научились смеяться. И с друзьями, которых на целую жизнь полюбили, мы привыкли надолго прощаться. Афганистан, 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 Афганистан. прощаться мы стали. Почему-то опять загрустили. Афганистан, 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 Афганистан.
So this was like the ending clip of the American army leaving Afghanistan. When I was doing research on a lot of places where we were filming in Afghanistan, I found out that one of the places where the kids were doing this contrabanda towards Tajikistan was an ex-Soviet army base. As you all know, the Soviet army has been in Afghanistan between 79 and 89. And of course, Afghanistan is still marked very hard about this war because a lot of destruction has happened. The Soviets bombed out, like, I don't know, millions of Afghans have died there. Of course, it was also for the Soviet army their Vietnam. A lot of traumas still are, you know, like keeping going on in Afghanistan about that time frame. And you know, funny enough and sad enough, actually the Americans took over like basically a lot of places and a lot of strategies that the Soviet army did at that time. Even like army bases in the same positions were located in the same places where the Soviet army was. So I started doing a lot of research, what was going on. I found out in these places where these kids were living, that in these valleys, that this was like a base where the Soviet army guarded like some valleys against Mujahideen coming from Pakistan in the 80s. And I found out that I was doing some research on the internet and I found out a lot of old pictures from that place, like on Google Maps, Google Earth, because before you had like some site which is called Panoramia, and you can stick like pictures on Google Earth of, if you go to a country, you can just like your travel picture stick there, and then other people can see how it looks like, basically, you know. And so I found old black and white pictures just from landscapes, from mountains, and I downloaded these pictures because it was really interesting, and I saw like in some corner, I saw a big wheel from some armed vehicle or something. So I thought like, okay, the only reason why this armed vehicle could be there was because of the Soviet army at that time. So you can leave a message when you see this picture to the person who posted that picture. So I wrote a message to the owner